Hello and welcome back to the channel. We'll be doing obese soldiers in war by simple history. Now this topic has actually been talking about a lot more recently because of the high obesity rates in a lot of Western countries. So yeah, let's go on with the video.
Obese soldiers in the military.
Now I think this is talking specifically about the US.
Combat is physically strenuous, and to make sure that their armed forces are operating at their fullest potential, militaries around the world require precise standards for the health and fitness of their servicemen and women. Sometimes, however, the healthiest and fittest individuals are not always available, and the armed services are forced to recruit those who are not at their peak physically. Although rare, overweight warriors have been fighting for millennia, in ancient Rome, gladiators were fed high amounts of barley gruel specifically to put on
weight so that they were larger and so that they could easily be killed more as well.
Pounds, the extra mass acting as a built-in body armor to protect them from the swords of their opponents in the arena. Centuries later, after getting badly injured in a jousting accident, the once fit and athletic King Henry VIII of England became immobile and began...
Yes, so it is said that he also then had a brain injury, which kind of sped himself into his descent into tyranny. And he also then had a large leg wound, which meant he was almost immobile for the rest of his life. And with him still eating his daily 5,000 calories, it meant that he gained a lot of mass.
On the pound.
And he still went to war with France and actually went to France to join the war.
Until he weighed in at about 400 pounds, together with a 52-inch waist, and had to have specially crafted armor made to accommodate his mighty frame, and even a custom-built wooden platform to enable him to...
And even his own special horse that could carry his weight.
...mount his war horse. Overall, the majority of those engaged in combat endured lives of hard physical labor and a limited caloric intake. In the major wars of the 20th century, one of the main issues with recruitment during these times was underweight soldiers. During both world wars, thousands of conscripts and volunteers were rejected for being undernourished, the fear being that these men would not have the strength, stamina, or sheer physical capabilities needed to...
And actually, this is why a couple of my family members didn't join the war, because we were quite poor, and so we were rejected.
Perform the arduous duties of a soldier. When recruits did arrive for basic training, those who were overweight quickly shed the pounds. During the Second World War, it was recognized that an average man of military age would require about 2,400 calories a day without engaging in any activity, the energy requirements then spiking due to the physical necessities of military service, countless miles of marching, hauling upwards of 60 pounds.
They would often have calorie-dense food, which wasn't very good, but it was calorie dense so that they could have enough energy to actually do anything.
Of equipment around, running, shooting, and the myriad of other metabolically taxing situations soldiers may find themselves in. Though the exact makeup and nutritional value required varied from country to country, most militaries try to issue their soldiers between 3,500 and 4,700 calories a day. Even with these seemingly high caloric rations, it was not uncommon for those carrying the extra pounds to lose the excess weight while in service.
Actually, a lot of soldiers actually lost weight because of how little they were eating, because, because you're doing much more activity.
Potential recruit was severely obese, he would almost certainly be rejected from service on medical grounds, as someone who was that unfit was going to be more of a liability than an asset. There were some exceptions to this, though.
And works on other countries. Get the exclusive
citizens from all walks of
NordVPN deal here. It's risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee.
During both world wars, the industrial scale of the conflicts forced entire nations to mobilize. Citizens from all walks of life were sent off to fight for their homeland, and the majorly overweight were no exception. In Britain, for example, former service members aged 41 to 55 were organized into the Home Guard. Many of these men were veterans of the Great War.
And actually, there is a British TV show called Dad's Army, which is basically a comedy version of the Home Front. And you can see on it that it was either conscientious objectors who still wanted to have something to do with the war and help the war, or older men who couldn't do it because of their physical strength or because they were too old. And so, yeah, that's how it kind of went, but it was also very much, if you weren't joining the war, you were joining the Home Front, and it was called Dad's Army because most of the soldiers in it were older.
Were familiar with the rigors of Army life, but with 2 decades between service, their most physically active days were behind them. These middle-aged men were eager to put on a uniform again, but many of them were more rotund than the last time they had worn.
I'm dubbing YouTube now the Adpocalypse. The great Adpocalypse of the 2020s.
Put on a uniform again, but many of them were more rotund than the last time they had worn one. These men were not expected to fight, the only exception being if the island was invaded.
Yes.
They were not subject to the same PT requirements.
So actually, they were going to be mobilised if the Battle of Britain failed. They would have been mobilised to do anti-air strikes and so on, and try to mostly protect London.
Of their younger peers who would see frontline service. Instead, they busied themselves with anti-aircraft duties, guarding airfields and other installations, and manned beach defenses. None of these tasks required significant caloric expenditure. Likewise, across the English Channel, the German military was also forced to utilize the overweight. After suffering titanic losses, especially on the Eastern Front, the Germans called up those who were less physically fit to fill the ranks that were rapidly being
because especially around Stalingrad, around the Battle of Stalingrad time, they had to use a lot of overweight soldiers. So one tactic that they used was to starve them for a week, feed them for a week, and then starve them for a week, so that they could actually slim down much more.
Completed. It's difficult to get exact figures, but pictorial evidence shows overweight soldiers in Wehrmacht uniforms almost certainly on garrison duty, where they did not have to face the high energy expenditure of their frontline comrades. Like their British counterparts, these duties included manning anti-aircraft guns, garrison duty, especially in occupied territories, and monitoring beaches along the Atlantic Wall. By putting these out-of-shape men in these locations, physically active soldiers were freed up to fight on the front lines elsewhere. While most overweight soldiers were sent to rear echelon duties, there were some exceptions to this rule. During the Vietnam War, the American military deliberately placed at risk those that would normally be considered unfit for service. Officially,
they would be allowed to try and protect people behind them, which I think was a bit of a stupid idea. It's just like when they put the low IQ people in.
Known as Project 100,000 and more cynically referred to as McNamara's morons, this was a deliberate attempt to place less than capable individuals in combat roles. The majority of the unwitting participants in this program were men of a lower IQ and with limited mental faculties, but also consisted of a number of men who were both underweight and overweight by military standards. For those who were overweight, they could be up to 20% heavier than the normal standards would allow. In order for the experiment to run properly, these men would be treated to the exact same physical standards as their more fit comrades. While no doubt some of the men did lose weight under the rigors of military life, they would often be assigned additional training, called...
And they'd also still be overweight by military standards, even though they lost that weight, because if they were up to 20% heavier, then they might lose just 10%.
The medically remedial enlistment program in order to correct their physical condition, including carrying the extra pounds. Otherwise, performance standards of these recruits were not lowered in any way, or the experiment that was Project 100,000 would be invalidated. Although there is no information about overweight soldiers and their direct combat performance, what is known is that McNamara's morons as a whole suffered casualty rates in excess of...
Yeah, so because obese people can't run as quickly because just how heavy they are, they meant that much larger amounts of casualties were caused by it. And I think if they did not send obese people into Vietnam, they could have greatly reduced the number of casualties that the US suffered.
Twice that of their peers. Fighting the flab continues to this day, and in recent decades, many Western countries have experienced a sharp increase in their obesity rate.
Yeah.
As a result, the pool of recruits...
So the US, I think it's now half of all citizens are at least obese. Now that is a sharp statistic, and meaning if we did go into the World War, the US would be the worst equipped because of the obesity rates.
Nation could draw upon is increasingly consisting of the overweight and the obese. In a recent survey, the U.S. military has found that 20% of male recruits and 40% of female recruits are heavier than normal, requiring them to lose the pounds before being able to serve their country. In spite of this, a reported 20% of active-duty American military personnel are still overweight. In Great Britain, while not quite as severe, approximately 1 in 10 British personnel are considered to be exceeding the standards for a healthy BMI, or body mass index.
But none of the Queen's Guard, because the Queen's Guard are heavily restricted in what they do and what they eat. They are actually one of the few army personnel which in the UK which don't actually have any obese people, because, well, the King's Army has some, but the King's Guard, because they are so vital to the integrity of the royal family, they cannot be obese. It's just something on which is, if you are obese, you will be dismissed until you lose that weight if you're part of the King's Guard.
There are theories as to why this is happening. One factor may be the sedentary nature of military service today. Many tasks are now computerized, meaning that the soldier spends a lot of time sitting in front of a computer screen, rather than hauling 60 or more pounds of gear through difficult conditions for hours, if not days on end. Exacerbating this issue is the food served on military bases. Fast food chains often set up shop in or near military bases, and they're often frequented by soldiers stationed nearby. Their calorie-dense menus contributing to this growing problem. Even combat zones are not safe from the scourge of fast food. In 2003, shortly after the invasion of
in Afghanistan, there was fast food chains in the military bases.
Iraq, two popular fast food franchises set up stations at a coalition military base located near Basra and were soon joined by others. Fast food locations soon sprang up at other American and British bases throughout the country. In both Iraq and Afghanistan, coalition soldiers were able to sample their favorite takeaway menus with a myriad of fast food restaurants, all ready to serve those in uniform. The rationale for having such unhealthy food is that it provides a morale boost for those in the field, giving them a taste of home while deployed overseas. While the rank and file should ideally be kept in shape, the commanders are a different matter entirely.
Oh, yeah.
During the Second World War, the commander of Germany's Luftwaffe Air Force was Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring, who was well known for his flamboyant lifestyle.
And I think he drank 2 litres of beer a day. 2 litres, which is high caloric, high cholesterol, and high sugar.
As well as his impressive girth. A slim and dashing fighter pilot during the First World War, he developed a morphine addiction after recovering from injuries sustained during Adolf Hitler's failed beer hall putsch in 1923, which contributed to his erratic behavior and mood swings, which may have led to his overindulgence for food and alcohol. By the time of the Second World War, he had ballooned to around 300 pounds, though his weight did fluctuate, as he would occasionally go on crash diets to lose the extra pounds, something the Allied propaganda program was eager to capitalize on. Numerous depictions of him in propaganda images show Goering as a rotund individual covered in medals, a flamboyant character to be made fun of. After his capture, American guards during the Nuremberg trials referred to him as the Fat One.
And actually, there's been a glitch. And actually, he was so obese that he couldn't fit in any planes anymore.
Even in the modern day, there are some commanders who take to the field while obviously totally out of shape. In the current war in Ukraine, there have been speculative reports of a certain General Pavel, a retired army officer who Vladimir Putin has recalled to active...
Yes, so Putin has recalled a lot of old soldiers from past conflicts to actually fight for him, because he's just losing men really quickly, because he doesn't expect the Ukrainians to be fighting as hard as they are, but they really are. And it has actually meant that a lot of what's happening right now has meant that there's a lot more obese soldiers, because they've retired. They have stopped looking after their body as much.
Service in light of the Russian losses and the conflict. General Pavel is believed to be a 69-year-old former officer who spent his retirement enjoying the finer things in life, eating a reported 5 full meals a day, washing it all down with a liter of vodka. It has been reported by certain media outlets that even the largest sized body armor is too small to fit his massive frame, requiring 2 vests spliced together to provide adequate protection. It turns out, however, that reports of General Pavel are grossly exaggerated. Fact-checkers looked into the absurd story, and it was revealed that Pavel is in fact a 58-year-old Border Patrol officer named Ivan Turchin. Further research has provided no evidence that he has been sent to Ukraine or has any other involvement in that conflict. While General Pavel is a fabrication of the media, what is true is the use of obese individuals for propaganda purposes.
Yeah.
Much like Hermann Goering in the Second World War, this is a case where an overweight man was lampooned to highlight the absurdity of the opposing side. Recently,
But it's not wrong. They're having to send obese and so on soldiers because they just can't do it anymore.
people have expressed concerns about the current obesity epidemic plaguing many societies, and the lack of physically fit recruits is seen as a national security issue. Whether this is true or not, history provides many examples of heavy-set warriors. Whether these individuals serve due to desperation, as an experiment in combat effectiveness, or simply the nature of their line of work, what is clear is that warriors can come in all shapes and sizes.
Anyway, that's the end of the video, so remember to like and subscribe and all that, and like and subscribe to Simple History, and yeah, bye.